Hello, fellow modeling and tabletop gaming enthusiasts, and welcome to the Mediocre Modeler Show. I am your host, the Mediocre Modeler, and as promised in our last episode, today we are actually going to take a look at a build review of the Rubicon Models 156 scale Willys Jeep. So it's definitely a fairly shake and bake kit to put together. We'll talk about a few minor pain points along the build process, but just to give you guys an idea of what to expect and how things sort of shape up if you ever opt to buy this kit and build one for yourself. So without any further ado, let's head on down to the bench and see how things turned out. Here we have our completed Jeep with 2 of the figures out of the 4 included. So these have not been glued in so they can be popped out for ease of painting. It's definitely a lot easier to paint the figures when they're separate. The machine gun is also, it's just kind of friction fit in there right now. Keep the pedestal separate to kind of keep it from breaking off, as well as the tires are not glued on as well. Again, just for ease of painting, but we'll go ahead and stick it back on there. So as you can see, what about the size you would expect for a 156 scale. Detail is pretty good. A lot of tiny little components. I mean, a lot of this stuff on the back is all separate components. You've got a nice little dashboard in there, all the seats you would expect to see, and that's also just friction fit in there for the time being. Spare tire, and of course you do have some relatively realistic, or realistic enough for gaming scale detail on the bottom of that. So the first thing I kind of found going into this is there's not really any positive locating points for a lot of the pieces. So the very first step is this, you've got your bottom chassis frame and everything right there, and then there's actually a piece of the front portion of it. Doesn't really have a good spot. You kind of see where the seam line is. You kind of just have to line it up with that. It was a little bit frustrating at first, took a few goes, but eventually got it right. The windscreen also has the option to fold up or down. I decided to just glue it in place folded. There is no glass for the windscreen, which, I guess that's fine enough for gaming. It was a little fiddly putting the machine gun onto the mount. You can see it doesn't quite fit perfectly, but, fits well enough. The thing that I don't like is there's no way to, without a little minor modification, to have it pointing straight forward. And there isn't actually a figure manning this. There's just a guy standing here with his arm resting on the machine gun. I like having figures in my gaming vehicles. Just adds a little bit more life to them. But that's not really an option with this one, and that's okay. We'll make do with that. And again, there's a little hole there that you have to open up before you close up. Glue the body to the chassis, because once you glue it in, you can't see it anymore, and it just kind of pops right in there. So just like that. You've also got the option for the 50 cal as well as the dual bazookas if you go with the armored Jeep variety. Some of the parts were kind of small and fiddly, like this tarp rack along here is actually 2 pieces. You've got the bottom piece, which is actually glued onto the frame of the Jeep, and then this top piece here is a separate piece. Maybe 20 minutes it took me to put together, as well as, assemble the figures. And the figures are, fairly well detailed. It feels to me like things are maybe a little bit soft detail wise compared to, like a Warlord figure. But, it is what it is. I mean, they're detailed enough for vehicle crews, and it doesn't want to go in there. And then of course we got the guy riding shotgun with his Tommy gun. So when I actually finished it, I compared it to some of the Warlord figures that I have, and noticed something kind of interesting. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and take that off so we can get this guy in there, and then get the guy riding shotgun in there. So again, this is a 1/56th scale kit, which we kind of throw about the terms 1/56 scale and 28 millimeters, somewhat interchangeable. But here is the Jeep actually next to a 28 millimeter plastic Warlord Games figure. As you can see, fairly close size-wise, but Yeah, the 156 scale is actually just a little bit smaller than 28 mil. You feel like this guy would just be like the Hulk riding in the back of this thing. I mean, it compares well enough size-wise. It's not a huge deal, but I would kind of like to see what a Warlord Jeep looks like scale-wise in comparison to this, and then in comparison to some of their figures. So that's just something to think about. If the scale difference is the kind of thing that would bother you that much, then you might want to look at investing in one of the Warlord ones instead. I'm not going to be too concerned about it. Yeah, it is a little bit goofy, but I mean, how often are these guys really going to be standing like right next to infantry? And just for a couple of other comparisons, here it is next to a Solar Auxilia Blaze Rifleman, sort of the grunt of the Solar Auxilia for the Horus Heresy. Yeah, as you can see, you know, again, 28 millimeter, 156 scale. And then sort of the pièce de résistance up next to a M4A9T Tesla Sherman. You know, it definitely looks a little bit more fitting scale-wise, and that's actually another thing we can compare to is we've got a tank commander, again, a Warlord plastic tank commander. You know, it's actually not too different from that, which I think is actually a bit smaller than the infantryman size-wise. Yep. So, and that brings us kind of to another point is, you know, this guy is definitely 28 millimeter heroic scale, where the hands and the head are kind of oversized to kind of emphasize the detail. But this guy here, I mean, this is more in line with a scale model where things are a little bit more properly proportioned. But again, up next to this Tesla Sherman, things look pretty good. You know, definitely size-wise, you know, a Sherman compared to a compared to a Jeep. So yeah, I'm looking forward to painting it. I think it's going to paint up pretty well. It'll look pretty good in this same paint scheme as our Sherman here. Just kind of some of the things that I noticed. It's a little bit fiddly, but again, the value for the money, I think it's difficult to beat. I'm not terribly concerned about it. So I'm pretty pleased with it so far. I'm looking forward to building the armored Jeep variant as well. So there you have it, folks. That is the Rubicon Models 156 scale build review of their Willys MB. And there we have it, folks. The build review of the Rubicon Models 156 scale Willys MB, the good old-fashioned Jeep. So overall, pretty pleased with the kit. The detail is good. The figures may be a little bit soft, but it should look good enough once they're painted up. The size scaling difference between 156 and 28 millimeter is it's noticeable, but it's not huge. It's almost kind of like the difference between a figure in 1/35th scale and 1/32nd scale. So it's not a huge thing, but it is just a little bit noticeable. If that's something that might bother you, you might want to look at maybe get the Warlord Jeep. But for me personally, I can live with that difference. It's not going to be a game. It's not going to be a deal breaker for me, because obviously I bought two of them, so it'd be kind of tough to send those. I mean, I could send them back, but I'm not gonna, because I like them. So hopefully this will help you out if you are looking to maybe get this kit, or if you're looking to maybe invest in one of the other ones. So hopefully you enjoyed that review. Thanks very much for watching, folks. If you feel so inclined, please drop a like, comment, or subscribe. And until next time, folks, may your paints be thin, your brushes be pointy, and your dice be hot.